Thank you for joining us on another episode of Latter-Gay Stories podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Ashworth, and you are at the intersection of sexuality and religion, where it meets at LDS Street and LGBTQ Avenue. We want to thank you for giving us an hour of your time for this, another fantastic Latter-Gay Stories episode. If you are watching on a video version of the podcast episodes, we invite you to participate in the live chat or make a comment below if you're catching this after our premiere. By joining the comment section, you're able to join a real-time live conversation with those who are participating in this episode, and you'll be able to share your thoughts and feelings as well. Also, by making a comment, clicking the like button, and even subscribing to this channel helps us to spread this particular episode. So if you do that, it would mean the world to our Latter-Gay Stories audience to be able to show up and be more visible in this discussion. Also, if you are catching us on an audio version of the Latter-Gay Stories podcast, we invite you to subscribe to this channel wherever you are catching your favorite audio podcasts. We welcome our listeners from iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, and so many others. Wherever you are listening, we invite you to leave a rating for this podcast. It also helps us to build bigger and stronger bridges between the religious and LGBTQ communities, where we are able to share episodes just like this. If you want to catch other episodes that we've done here on the podcast, we invite you to visit our website at lattergaystories.org and click on the episode tab. We also have a live blog as well with updated written stories. Hundreds and hundreds of written stories are available online at lattergaystories.org. Again, we want to thank you for giving us an hour of your time, and thank you for joining us on this, another fun episode at Latter-Gay Stories. Today's episode is not any different in terms of genuine, heartfelt, deep discussions into what it's like to be queer and have roots in Mormonism. We are going to have, I think, a very candid discussion about the experience growing up in the church, navigating the journey through understanding who and what you are. Also some trigger warnings. We want to talk about suicide. We want to talk about mental health. We want to talk about the difficult parts of navigating this journey as well. So without going into much more detail and allowing the story to be told through his own version, I want to welcome to the podcast Weston Smith. Weston, welcome.
Hello. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here. Now, we've had your dad on the podcast earlier. He talked about a book that he wrote and the journey through you coming out, making those positive impacts through your family journey. But today is your story, and I'm happy to have you here on the podcast to share your experience and the firsthand versions of what we experienced. Let's first, now I gave really just a 50,000-foot view of what we're going to talk about today, but first, let's give the audience an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit more about who Weston is and what makes him tick.
Okay, so I am 23 years old. I grew up in the church. I'm currently living in Toronto, finishing my undergraduate at the University of Toronto. When I was a little kid, we lived there for a couple of years when my dad was in law school, and then we spent the rest of my childhood in the Massachusetts area. I served a mission in Brazil. I'm really, really into writing. I just released my first book called This Body of Water. It's available on Amazon. You can find the link to that at westonsmithbooks.com. It's a book about my experiences with all of this, and I'll get into some more details about what I cover in the book. But really, it's just a full, brutally honest telling of the ways that I was hurt by the church, by people outside of the church, by society in general. But it's just a very honest retelling of trauma and that, because I felt like I need to get it out there for myself. I'm very proud of it. I've worked really hard on it, and that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I love it. I want to start first with, sometimes we start with the genesis, the beginning of the story. And that usually begins at the point where we realize we're different, that there's something about us that isn't as congruent with the experiences that we see in our friends' experiences. At what point did you, Wes, realize that you were different?
Different is such an interesting word because there's so many people who ask you, right, what was the first time you realized that you're gay? But it's hard to answer that because there's a lot that goes into that. I recognized from a very young age that I was definitely more feminine than other people. And that was kind of the thing throughout like my early childhood, I would say that I struggled the most with. And even like getting into high school and stuff, it was more about not feeling like I was enough of a man for various things that caused me a lot of problems. The first time I ever had a crush on a boy was kind of just as I had been ordained a deacon was kind of when the feeling started, because I was in deacon's quorum with this guy all the time. We went to the same school. I saw him in class. You know, we went to scout camp. We were in the same tent and all of these things. And it was something I didn't even realize was a crush until looking back on it years later, because it was something so innocent, right? And also growing up as a kid, right? You're trained to look for a crush on a girl, right? You're like, oh, my heart's supposed to be a little bit faster. I'm supposed to really want to spend time with them, all this stuff. But you're not really looking for it with another guy. So it didn't register to me until later in high school. But yeah, so this boy, it was hard for me to kind of, I just feel like so often when people talk about, you know, gay relationships, they talk about, you know, oh, the sex, or, you know, it's just a weird, perverted, whatever. But the feelings I had for him were so innocent. It's just like that genuine longing of wanting to spend more time with someone, of seeing all of the good parts about a person and just loving that, you know? And it's just, we were kids, right? Like I wanted to, like, you know, wrestle and, like, you know, splash water in his face at scout camp, like this kind of stuff, you know, just be playful. And then, you know, as I you know, you're a teenager, hormones are happening. Like that's kind of when I couldn't really, because I kept seeing him, right? And all throughout high school, because we were good friends, and I couldn't really deny it any longer. I was like, okay, there was a certain point where I was like, I'm really in love with this guy, and in a way that, like, I'm not. I had a girlfriend at the time. I was like, I do not feel the same way about her that I feel about him. And that kind of prompted a crisis in me beyond what was already happening at school. So
I kind of wondered what was happening, because I wonder what you do with that type of information. You said this really started when you were a deacon. So for those who aren't familiar with
like
Mormonism,
age 12, yeah.
Yeah, that's 12. And it's also, that's like the onset of puberty. All these things are happening. This young boy is growing into a man, and a lot of hormones are kicking in, and a lot of gears are moving, and things are happening in a different way. So what do you do with that information? You are now dating a girl. You're in high school, so you have a couple of years of this churning inside of you. What do you do with that type of experience, especially in the lens of Mormonism? Because you're not only in the thick of that, but you're in the thick of church as well.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of it was all interconnected in this time of my life for me. From age 13 onward, and it's not necessarily just because of the gay thing, but there's a lot of things that went into me starting to have suicidal thoughts. I think the first time I ever really considered anything like that, I remember I was sitting in a history class. We were learning about World War I, and I just remember zoning out, looking at the wall, and having a thought that like maybe I shouldn't be here anymore. I was like, 13. Because I have ADHD, which made it hard for me to fit in socially with people already. And then on top of that, like I said, I was more feminine. And so, middle school, high school is a time when you're really, as a guy, or really anyone, right, is really kind of trying to figure out how they want to present their gender, right? It's like, it's a big thing where it's like you have to be enough of a man or enough of a woman, and there's new expectations because of puberty and all these things. And I didn't feel comfortable with myself at all. And then when I realized I was gay on top of that, it was kind of, and additionally, I honestly, I could have dealt with all that as it was, but the church for me was just like a multiplier, where it was like all of this additional stress of not being enough, of never working hard enough, of these expectations my parents set on me to get into BYU above, everything. And so they were hounding me all the time about my grades and things like that, because they thought that was what they need to do as good Mormon parents. So all of these expectations from society about my masculinity, from my parents about my grades, and just the concern you already have as a teenager for your future. And then the gay thing coming in, throwing in a curveball, and realizing that you're going to have to, I realized as soon as I came to terms with it for myself and came out to myself, that it was going to be an uphill process for years. And that was the time where it was just really, really, really bleak. And I was actually hospitalized because I had a bit of a mental breakdown, where I kind of explain it honestly from the outside. It looked like one of the possessions in like the New Testament or something, because I don't have any recollection of it past a certain point, but apparently I was like screaming and thrashing around, and just, it was, I think my brain's way of trying to like keep me from doing something to myself, where I lost total control. And I just woke up in the hospital and I had to be sedated because I was screaming, like saying stuff that didn't make sense, just yelling at people, and like totally incoherent. And so, that was kind of like a turning point for me, where I was like getting home from the hospital after that, just asking, like, how did this get this messed up? How am I, like, I really just don't want to be here anymore. I really don't. And part of it, what was comforting to me at the time was that I felt like there was something, I felt like I was so faithful that I was sure that there was something better on the other side. Because some of my Sunday school teachers, you have the conversation about the plan of salvation, and the plan of salvation being, everybody who is even like, as long as you don't openly deny God, right, and have that full knowledge of God and then deny him, everybody gets a degree of heaven. So I looked at that, I was like, well, and there's a specific quote I remember. One of my Sunday school teachers told us that, like, if a man saw even the lowest degree of heaven that he could be earned, he would do anything. He would give up his life to get there. And that for me was not a good thing to learn, because it really prompted a lot more of that suicidal ideation, where it's like, I can get to the bottom of the celestial kingdom, right? Like, I don't care at this point. Like, just get me out of here. Because I hated everything about myself.
Did you, going through the throes of these episodes of depression and issues of self-worth, seeing how society was foreordaining the type of man that you should have been in their eyes, did you, how do you navigate that world? I mean, just real talk. Like, did you feel supported by your family? Did you feel supported by your church? You said the doctrines, the policy seemed to be some form of lifeline, but that lifeline was also a death wish, and that's not healthy either. Where does someone 13, 14, 15 in your shoes turn for safety and for understanding and to be consoled?
I honestly didn't really have anywhere. It was kind of me versus the world. And because my relationship with my parents was not good enough at that time to really lean in on them as a support network. Because now, you know, like things have changed, right? But like at that time, it was, I really didn't have anywhere. It really did feel like it was just me versus the world. And like, I couldn't, I didn't really have anywhere to go because I didn't feel comfortable talking to my church leaders about it because, I mean, my dad was the bishop at the time. So that kind of made it more difficult in some ways because it's like if I have to talk about this, I have to talk about it with my dad or one of his counselors. And like counselors were longtime family friends. And, you know, they see me as this kind of like, you know, maybe a little bit quiet, maybe introverted, but, you know, I didn't want to ruin the image people had of me. And you're already so concerned about your image, right? Like I was already so concerned. I'm like, people don't see me as enough. If I tell them about these things, like it's just going to come collapsing down. Like I don't need anyone else to kind of shame me because I was getting so much shame from people at school for crossing my legs, for liking things like romance books, and for reading too much and for liking poetry and, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And all of that shame, and then going to church every week and hearing over and over again about the eternal family and how you have to be worthy, and also all the sexual shame of like masturbation and feeling like the shame of being gay that the church kind of pushed on me of like this is something that you shouldn't be doing, and then also having the additional thing of masturbation, which I think a lot of people in the church kind of have, where it's like they feel sexually stymied because of how the church teaches the law of chastity. Just this whole perfect storm of things where it just really felt like I was totally isolated.
That isolation, now you earlier talked about being hospitalized. You undoubtedly had met with therapists and other counselors to kind of help navigate that world. Where and how did you finally start seeing some light at the end of the tunnel? What shifted? What was able to break through that pride cycle that you kind of alluded to, this idea of what will other people think of me as opposed to how do I actually see myself? What were the positive steps that took place that allowed you to finally find some footing?
So when this hospitalization happened, I don't think my parents really thought of it as like a mental health crisis because I had kept it really well hidden from them, how much I was suffering. I think they saw the outside effects of it because what I would do is I would come home, I would be so miserable. I would go to my computer and play games for 8 or 10 hours straight and just try to forget, right? Try to escape somewhere else. And so they saw that. They're like, this kid is lazy. He's not motivated, whatever. But it was for me, it was like the only thing I had, the only coping mechanism I really had. And it was almost like a form of substance abuse in a way, because the game was just so much dopamine, so much like, oh, I'm in the moment kind of thing. That's kind of how I coped with it. Yeah, it just, the light at the end kind of happened after that, where after this episode, they still kind of were thinking like, oh, this is just some migraine or something that happened, right? Like, because you don't just go to like acting out of the blue. And I kind of started explaining to them like, no, this was like a mental health thing, like something like that. And I'm suicidal and I don't want to be here anymore. And then my mom, I remember like having a conversation with my parents and being like, oh, well, we won't let you do that. I was like, well, it's what I want, you know? And, you know, just having them really, because when you're in that dark of a place, you don't necessarily think about whether or not, you think about the effect it's going to have on people, but you think about it in a morbid way. Like I imagine my own funeral, hundreds and hundreds of times. And thinking about all the people who were going to miss me or whatever, who was going to show up and who was going to say what. And like, as a way of like kind of reminding myself that people still cared about me, but it's different when your parents tell you in the moment, like, we're not going to let you do this. It kind of got through to me that like, okay, I can't actually do this. Like, the pain would be too much for some of these people to bear. And I don't know, some of the one thing that really kept me from like ever really going through with it was also just, I have little siblings, and I couldn't do it knowing that they were, you know, gonna have to watch me afterwards. So
a lot of what we're going to talk about today, something I kind of dubbed innocence lost. These opportunities that were lost in your world by not being able to be who and what you are. The opportunities that we lose within Mormonism, within Christianity, within our religious circles that are designed to prevent people like you from living a full, healthy, happy, authentic, and honest life. What were some of those experiences that you felt you lost? And I want to talk about these all through the lens of pre-coming out, because a lot of what you've described up to this point have happened prior to you coming out to your parents, because you don't come out to your parents until you're 16 years old.
Correct. So I talk about all the stuff I'm talking about so far. I've only come out to myself, right? That's the only person who I've come out to. And so kind of once I come out to myself, I started looking, and this was also another kind of area where I started finding some support, was I went online looking for kind of anything, you know, that would be kind of affirming for me. And so I found a couple of queer chat rooms with people from like all over the world. And, you know, I would just hang out in these whenever I was feeling kind of lonely or wanted something to do, just as a sense of like validation. And I actually met this one guy, and we started chatting a bunch, and you know, like DMing each other. And over time, like it turns out that he lives really close to where my grandparents live in Toronto. We kind of started developing feelings for each other, and that's kind of how. This is kind of where the church also starts getting involved, because I knew that we could have had a relationship, but again, with all the shame of like no sex before marriage, like none of that, it really kept me from doing that. And it got to the point where, kind of also with the mission, right? Because it was around this time, I was like probably 15, 16 when we started messaging. And it was friends for like a year or two, and then we started messaging more. But by the time we were like really ready for like a relationship, it was kind of more, I was like a junior in high school, and then senior year, I was going to go on a mission after that. And so the church kind of cut off that relationship. And I can talk about that more, like, I guess, with the mission too, a little bit.
Maybe this is so I guess before we hit mission, let's talk about the events leading up to you coming out to your parents. Mm-hmm. Because clearly this was a lot of weight that's being held up on the shoulders of a very vulnerable young person who was bearing more weight than he should have necessarily taken upon him. But I also think that your story is familiar enough to a lot of people with a background in Mormonism that if we just run away from who and what we are, there's always this promise that it'll get better. The theology behind this topic always lends itself to say, well, if you pray harder, read your scriptures, are more righteous, more church attendance or temple attendance, you will be engulfed by the Spirit, the blessings of the priesthood, of your baby blessing, all those things can take effect, your patriarchal blessing, all those things take effect and will buoy you up and help you to survive all of these calamities that have come. But that wasn't happening in your case. And so I want to get to the point where you are finally ready, or the situation surrounding your coming out. What finally made you have that discussion with your parents? And as a result of that discussion, what changed?
So I guess it just got to a point where the church was kind of a big part of coming out, honestly, because I didn't have any real reason or need to come out to them. I didn't feel like, because the things with this guy who was messaging Bruce weren't super serious yet, and so we were still friends, and so it was just kind of like and obviously I wasn't going to ask out this other guy I had a crush on because he was in church and like he already had a girlfriend I think at the time and all this other stuff, and wasn't gay, so it wasn't going to work out. So I was fine kind of keeping it on the back burner and kind of dealing with it myself and kind of just, using these queer chat rooms and things like that to get my affirmation. But when I started, the church really started to hurt me. And that's kind of where I needed to talk with my parents, because I knew my parents knew more about the church, especially my dad, who's very doctrinally like sound with all of this stuff. I knew he would probably have answers for me. And so I guess I remember the time that kind of inspired me to come out was when we were doing baptisms for the dead in the temple one time. And the temple coordinator who was there gave a little, they always give like the little talk after everyone's finished the baptisms and you're getting ready to pack up and go. And he just started going on and on about how grateful he was to see all these youth doing this and making this good choice, and how all of the youth in this, he promised, he's like, all the youth in this chapel one day are going to have their own families and they're going to understand how important this is for their children to do. And I can't wait to see that. I just started sobbing because I was like, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to get that. And so it just, it's funny because everyone was like, oh, he's feeling the Spirit so much right now because he's crying in the temple, like, the good Mormon boy, he was just overcome. But it was more of that realization where it's like, I am going to be miserable. Like, I'm going to feel like this, how I'm feeling now for, however long I'm alive. And it got to the point where that, like a religious suffering, right? That ideology of like, I need to have an eternal family and it's not going to happen. Where it's like, I started running out of answers because I did some research by myself and like went through the doctrinal parts of it, and I couldn't find answers. So I eventually, when I decided to come out to my parents, it was because of that, right? And I came out to a couple other people first. I think I came out to my brother and then my aunt and then my parents. So kind of worked up to it. Yeah.
What was that experience like coming out to your parents? Was it a positive experience? Would you have done something different? Would you have wanted something different?
It was positive. I knew that going into it, I was like, okay, there's probably like an 85% chance they're going to be accepting, because my dad had talked about, as bishop, he had talked a lot about these issues and like surrounding all the gay stuff. And he'd always been kind of open about it, and he had talked to other people in the ward about it. And we had some dinner table discussions about it too. And they were accepting, but even it's hard when like you're like mostly sure, but like I said, that 85%, but like that 15% chance could mean you're getting kicked out of the house, right? Or like, or something, worst case scenario. And so it took me a while, but eventually we were in the car and I just told Dad, I was like, hey, don't really think things are going to work out with my girlfriend that I was dating at the time. And yeah, I don't really think I'm attracted to girls. And that kind of sparked a conversation. The thing I remember from this conversation was just him being really bewildered because my dad is very attracted to girls. And so he's like, it doesn't make, like, you look at them and you don't feel anything, like Sports Illustrated, like nothing, like Sports Illustrated magazines, like nothing. I'm like, no. He's like, okay, well, I believe you because like, obviously, like if you were straight, like these things would work. Right. So I thought that attitude, like, I know he's kind of like, maybe like a little bit embarrassed by that he wasn't more loving, but for me, it was like, I was like, that's such it showed me that like, he didn't view it as something taboo or anything like that. It was just, he was having a conversation with his son about this. Right. And it felt like a very, father-son moment that I'll always remember. And then he told my mom, and my mom just, cried and hugged me and made it clear how much she really cared about me. So,
was there a reason why you chose to come out to your dad first and not your mom?
My mom and I have a very special relationship. We both have dealt with a lot of trauma and trauma caused to us by like outside people, and so we haven't always been the best to each other. And so at that time, I was kind of more comfortable talking with my dad, because our relationship was kind of strained at that time, I would say. But yeah.
I want to kind of lay out something that I've observed through hundreds of interviews, and your story kind of fits within a lot of those parameters. When we feel like we're at a point where we have no more resources, we start searching even more diligent for some of those resources out there. And it sounds like you found, in a very typical way, a lot of people in our situation, I went through the same thing, reached out online for support and for connection and for community to be able to find our herd, to be able to find people out there who are like us. And you found that in someone in Toronto, and found that relationship. And so I often call this kind of the fire hose scenario, where these feelings kind of build up inside of us and we have no outlet for them. This want for connection and this want for love, to love and to be loved, to be able to give and receive that, to be able to understand connection, to give words of affirmation and receive words of affirmation back. Just the framework of a relationship of love. And when we can't find that organically at home or in our own personal situations, we reach out for them. And it sounds like you were able to do that online. So that fire hose situation is where you reach out, find the things that you need, and it kind of douses the flames that surround us and kind of tempers everything and keeps everything at bay until those flames reach out and get out of hand again. And then you often, or we all often, ran back to social media, apps, these spaces in order to drown that, add water, drown those flames a little bit and get back to these levels of normalcy. This is kind of a pattern that we see happen over and over and over again. And you smile because
it's true.
It's true. Yeah. It happens. So, but when the fire hose doesn't work anymore, that methodology isn't sustainable, that's when the rubber meets the road. That's when reality hits. And that's often when we come out. That's often when in the moments of most despair, we need to reach out to other people and let them in and let them get to know us at a more intimate and deeper level. And it sounds like that was the spot that you were at in coming out and reaching into that world and allowing your parents to get to know you better. I'm curious as to what that did for your overall mental health. And then where did Weston go after that? Where did your life lead you now, allowing your parents more fully to understand what you were experiencing?
So after that experience in the hospital, I kind of had like a realization where I was like, okay, like over the next couple of weeks, I was like, okay, I'm going to keep living. I'm going to like commit to myself. I'm going to do this. but the suicidal thoughts are probably still there for, they would continue. And so I guess the thing that changed was kind of more just that, like, it was more bearable in a lot of ways, but it still wasn't enjoyable, right? It's like I wasn't on the brain. I wasn't on the edge of the cliff anymore, but I was still like somewhere nearby, kind of like looking down at the valley all the time. And so I guess what made it more bearable was also just kind of finally being more accepting of myself, realizing that like a lot of the people I was hanging out with at school were never going to like me no matter how hard I tried. Because that was a big thing for me. I was like, I need to fit in with this masculine friend group. And I can't go hang out with the drama kids. The drama kids are weird, and some of them are gay, and some of them drink, and some of them smoke. And that was another thing that I think actually contributed a lot to my isolation, was that I was so willing to discount anyone who didn't fit the church mold. It's like, if you are not following the church standards like to a T, then I don't feel comfortable being friends with you, kind of thing. And so, yeah, I really, once I got into kind of started figuring things out a little bit more and started realizing that like, it's not even necessarily my fault that these people don't like me. Like, they don't like me because they're a bunch of like jerks or whatever, or because they're also insecure about their own masculinity, right? And like, I pose a threat to that. And as I kind of realized that more in high school, I started making friends with other people and kind of just started feeling more comfortable in my skin. I still wouldn't say it was like anywhere, like I still had a ton of anxiety because of all of the times I tried to interact with people and it had backfired. And I kind of learned that like going up and talking with people was going to end poorly for me. That's kind of like the message I got, like had trained in me. But it slowly started getting better just as I started feeling more comfortable in my own skin. And like I said, part of that was coming out, but part of it was also just realizing I could be more feminine, and that it wasn't like, I shouldn't have listened to the people who were judging me. I should have listened to myself.
Yeah, I think that's a really honest and fair point. I mean, sometimes society, and especially religious societies, will shame us into staying in the closet because they think it's the closet, it's being gay, that is the problem. That is the reason why we have to hide who and what we are. It's actually the hiding.
Yeah.
The hiding is really the part that hurts us the most. It's not being authentic. It's not being able to allow people in. It's not being able to shine with the creation that we are, and the beautiful ingredients and aspects of our individuality. And I think that's often what religious communities miss. Not only are they shaming us for the wrong reasons, but they're missing out on who Weston is, and the things that Weston brings to the table by forcing us into the closets. So I wonder, I mean, really, we're at the point now where you're preparing for a mission. You've come out to your parents, you've kind of opened up the world, and things have in real ways gotten a little bit better for you. No longer hanging on to the edge of the cliff by your fingernails, but as you mentioned, and I think super fitting, you can still see the valley, and you're still at in the tops of the mountains in a very real way. Does that lead you to now start saying, maybe a mission is for me? And what can I offer the church? What can I offer myself? What can I offer my family? Or what were the reasons behind you being a gay Latter-day Saint, still wanting to serve a mission and still wanting to be in those spaces?
Yeah, so this is kind of where the ADHD kind of comes back into it, because a lot of it, throughout all of high school, right? The thing with ADHD is that it's hard for you to do a lot of things that other people can do normally, right? So like regularly studying was really hard for me just because of that, especially because I wasn't diagnosed at the time with ADHD. So we didn't know that, like, I didn't know that it wasn't me being lazy. It was just like me having a disorder that made it difficult for me, and I needed different accommodations. But at the time I was dealing with all of this really nasty, these nasty feelings that were kind of put in me by both by my teachers and my parents and people who were trying to do the right thing and get me to study, get me to do the right thing. But but ended up creating these really big feelings of shame. Like I felt like I was just a kind of worthless and lazy piece of crap. And so I felt like if I went on a mission, nobody could say that about me anymore. Nobody could tell me I was lazy. Nobody could tell me that I wasn't working hard. And so there was that aspect of it. Because I knew the mission wasn't going to change my sexuality or anything like that. I know some people who go kind of really wanting to believe that, but I wasn't, you know, I wasn't in that like delusional like that, I don't think. And so it was kind of more just like, I'm going to go because I want to show people that I'm a hard worker, and there's a community of people who want me to do it, and it's going to be hard and it's going to suck, but, you know, it's whatever. I've been, one of my first mission entries or journal entries on the mission is, this is exactly what I thought it was. This is turning out exactly how I thought it was going to be. It's miserable, but I've been miserable for, you know, however many years at this point. I can be miserable for 2 more. It's fine. And the fact that that's like one of my first journal entries, I look back, I'm like, oh, you should have gotten out of this way sooner. But, you know, it is what it is. And that's kind of how it turned out. And another big part of it was also that my grandfather, my dad's dad, was going through a really bad health time, and I'm his oldest grandson. He'd served as a mission president, and he was on the way out, and I wanted to give him like kind of one last send off, and I knew it would be important for him. It would mean a lot to him if I went. So there was also kind of that aspect of it too.
Now, you generally are only out to a very select few people, but part of that mission experience is also having interviews with bishop and stake president, which in your situation, you took those opportunities to come out to them as well. Before we talk about the mission, and I know this is just jumping back just a little bit, but
yeah,
I am curious, and I think the audience would likely be curious as well as to what those experiences were like coming out to your stake president, those positions of authority.
Yeah.
How was that received? And then also, how did that impact you?
So this is kind of going to tie back into Bruce. So I actually, yeah, I think my dad had just been released from his calling as a bishop. And so I don't know. I don't remember exactly how I came out to my bishop for the interview, but I remember the interview with the stake president much more clearly because it was a lot more pronounced. And I told them at the time, because they ask you about the law of chastity, right? Like every missionary who's going out, they ask you a lot of questions about it because it's something that is really important for them to know if you're going to be representing the church for 2 years. Like they want to know all the details. And so I don't know. I told him, and I had like a scene in my book where I just really described this, but I told him I'm like 40% gay, 60% hetero kind of thing. Cause I told him I was bisexual. So he asked me, he's like, oh, well, what are the percentages? I'm like, 60-40, you know, for girls. And, total lie, just cause I thought it would be more palatable to him. Yeah. And so, but I remember after that, he told me, he's like, you need to work to minimize whatever is causing the 40% then. He's like, I know it's a lot of it's biological, but a lot of it is also like how much you expose yourself to, right? Like you got to keep the thoughts kind of in a box. And so if there's anything that's, you know, causing them to come out of the box or anyone, then you should probably not, you know, poke that bear. And so Bruce and I were really close at that point. And after that, I went to my car and I deleted the app I was using to message him and just like full on ghosted him because of that. And it's one of the things that I think is the biggest loss of innocence that I have to grieve, because we should have gotten to have our teenage relationship, you know. Since then, you know, I've moved back to Toronto for other reasons, and we've re-encountered, and it's just, you know, we wouldn't have worked out in the end, but, you know, there's something to be said for like, I should have been allowed to have that relationship and make those mistakes and learn what I need to learn. And I didn't even get the chance because I felt like I just didn't really have a choice. Like I felt like I had to do this. That's something that I still grieve a lot.
You ended up being called to serve in Brazil.
Yes, Curitiba.
Which you didn't go to the traditional MTC experience in Provo.
No.
You went to the Brazilian CTM.
Sao Paulo, yep.
And even there, you experienced levels of homophobia.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because when we often, as Latter-day Saints, especially, I mean, just these beautiful sunlit stories of missionaries who go into the mission field and there's all these little disciples of Christ running around and everything is beautiful and perfect and they're saying their prayers and reading their scriptures and they are the Bruce R. McConkie mission commission, just the absolute they are saying, doing, and being the exact thing Christ would say, do, and be if he were here personally witnessing or ministering to the people. Was that the case at the CTM? Was that the case?
So the way I like to describe the CTM, and I don't know how much of this is just in Brazil. I imagine it also occurs in Provo, but when you put a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old boys in a space, in like a dorm hall together, it very quickly turns into like a frat house, but except like a Mormon frat house without like, where you're studying the scriptures a lot every day.
I'd say Diet Coke frat house, but in your case, it's vanilla Coke frat house, right?
Yeah, and so all of this was kind of like, I have a bunch of stories that I could tell about, shenanigans that occurred and things like that. But so when I went on the mission, I was already having a lot of doubts about my faith, and so I was not. I promised myself at the beginning of the mission that I was not going to be one of those missionaries who was just baptize. I'm like, I'm here to make people happy. I'm here to love people. I'm here to be compassionate. Because those were the things that like my parents really instilled to me as Mormonism, right? Like my dad, especially, I think is responsible for most of my moral compass, where it's like, you do this, you're going to be good to other people. Like that's what you're here to do. That's why any of us are here. And so I was like, I'm only going to baptize people if it's good for them and if they really want it and if, the gospel's right for them. And part of the CTM is that they kind of, even if you go in with that kind of strong, like resolute thing, they do start to break you down, right? It's like, you're going to baptize. The church is good for everyone, of course. Why are you even questioning that? Like, and it's so black and white on the mission that like you really do become a different person, right? Like you stop being Weston, you become Elder, right? It's the name. I think the name changes is deliberate, right? It's like you have to be a different person than you are, right? That caused a lot of dissonance for me, and from the very beginning, it caused a ton of dissonance, and it never went away the entire mission. I kind of just, once I got to the field, I kind of just learned how to manage it in different ways. And that kind of varied area by area how I managed it. But like, because in Brazil, you're walking everywhere. One of the things I would do to cope is if we had a bad appointment or something, or if like something homophobic came up, there would be, I would just say, Elder, especially once I was a senior companion, I'd be like, okay, Elder, we're going to go to this point. We're going to do knock doors over here. And I'm like, pick the area that's farthest away within our area. And it's just so I could walk the hour there and not have to think about anything else and just focus on walking and just clear my head.
Were you out to your mission president? Were you out to your companions in the mission field?
Some of them, yeah. So I came out to my mission president in the first interview we had. I was like, this is something you need to know, just because I think it's important that you know. And he's very loving, my mission president. I respect him a lot. He worked for church education services and was very keen on loving people, and he felt like me in a lot of ways, where it was like the love is the most important thing. So he genuinely did a very good job of making sure every single one of his missionaries felt loved by him, and I definitely felt that. That said, he was definitely there were definitely things that he was just not properly equipped to deal with. Where it's just, you know, there's a reason that there's like certain therapists who kind of target, you know, queer people, because they have very specific traumas most of the time that you need to know how to deal with. And over the course of my mission, it became more apparent that he did not have, you know, that tool set, which, you know, why would he? So yeah, that started becoming an issue, but that's kind of later in the mission. I don't know if we want to get there yet. But as for my companions, mixed bag. I told some of them, didn't feel comfortable telling others. Some of them I did tell, and it ended very poorly. And at a certain point, like, I think everyone on the mission kind of knew, just because, you know, rumor spreads. And yeah, I will say that the Brazilians I love them so much, just because they were always so much more understanding than the Americans were. Like, and I don't know if this could be my experience, but also just in general, I feel like Brazilians are a lot more of an open-minded people, where it's like, you know, we don't care so much about, you know, what you do in the bedroom. That's like, everyone's got their stuff, because they have carnival and things, and sex is kind of a lot more just of an open topic there. And I don't know, I ended up really loving Brazilian culture and the food and the people. It's just, I love that country. So, yeah.
I'm glad it's exciting to see, like, that this wasn't the worst experience of your life. Like, there were still, I should preface this. Surprisingly, there's a large number of Latter-day Saint missionaries who are currently serving their missions who listen to this podcast, because I get their messages.
Yeah.
They reach out on a continued basis. COVID was one of the grand reasons why I think a lot of these Latter-day Saint missionaries started finding podcasts and finding resources outside of their mission. They were knocking fewer doors. A lot of the proselytizing now happens online through Facebook, through social media tools. But it surprised me the number of Latter-day Saint missionaries who now have access to smartphones and social media and podcasts and episodes like this, who then started reaching out for the very reasons you were. They still needed that connection. Maybe even back to what we talked about earlier, that fire hose analogy, where they still needed to be able to reach out to people who were like them. And so it is exciting to me to hear that even though there were some, you said mixed bags, some of those not so positive experiences, there also were opportunities to be able to let people in and allow them to get to know you at a deeper and more sustainable level. But as we get further into your story, that sustainability doesn't last. And you do end up leaving your mission early, but you also have some pretty terrible experiences. Let's talk a little bit about those. Yeah.
So the thing about the mission is it's so dependent on your companion and your area, right? And who you're living with, because you don't have any control over those things. And when you're with these people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like, it's like being married to someone, right? And it's like, if for that time, for however long the president decides. And so it's, and the times where, like, I was with people that I got along well with, like, I made some of the first friends I'd ever made in my entire life, because I didn't have that in high school. And so that for me was like, those moments, I wasn't thinking so much, like, the dissonance was still there. And whenever I would do studying, I'd be like, okay, I kind of still don't want to be here. But then, you know, we would joke or we would do something, and, like, I don't know, they would find a way to make me laugh. Like the people who were in the house with me, the other elders, and it'd be okay for a while. But when I got to a certain area with a certain companion, this companion is also very loving, very compassionate. He refused to let any of the irmãos who would feed us, they never did the dishes. He always insisted on doing the dishes. And he was the first elder I'd seen kind of do that. He would stop people in the street. He had a genuine love for everyone, which made it really hard for me, because I did come out to him. I told him, I was like, I'm struggling with this. I've struggled with this the entire mission. I'm kind of getting to a breaking point here where it feels like the dissonance is just too much, because I have run out of stuff to study. Like, I have dug myself so deep in this hole so many times, And I keep panning for gold and I keep finding nothing. And his responses to it kind of, because he grew up in rural Idaho, and so he hadn't really encountered this, I don't think. And he had only had like a church education, right? Like he only knew what the church had taught him. And hearing that said back to me, right? Because he said a couple of things that he, even once he said them, he recognized, like once he saw my reaction, because we were talking about like my options, right? We talked about the stuff as you're walking around, you talk for hours, right? From appointment to appointment. And so we ended up talking about, I have like 3 options. I can either stay celibate, be miserable, I can mixed orientation marriage, it's probably going to fall apart, or I can actually, date guys, try and be happy, find something that works for me. And we talked about the first 2 options for a long time, and he ended up agreeing with me. He's like, yeah, I see how like neither of those could work. And then started talking about the third one, and I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something along the lines of, it doesn't matter how many hours we spend talking about this or how much you try and convince me. A man marrying another man is always going to feel as wrong to me as a man trying to marry a horse. And when he said that, it just clicked for me. I was like, oh, this is how people actually see me in the church. I'm not, when I say I'm gay, it's not, people aren't thinking about the tenderness that I feel for these guys, right? Like that innocence I was talking about earlier with that crush. It's like, I just want to be around this guy. Like I want to hug him. I want to like, give him kisses on the cheek, this kind of stuff. Like stuff that's very pure. They're thinking of like perverted sex acts kind of thing, or a lot of them are, right? It's not, it's something it's just a taboo, right? It's just, and so having that realization, and then also retroactively piecing together a bunch of other things people had said to me, where I was like, oh, it's because they saw me this way that they were making these comments and trying to direct me this way. I kind of reached a breaking point where I was like, I am in this place where people think I'm disgusting, and people think I'm, just a pervert or that kind of thing. And it got really bad, the dissonance, because I would keep studying. I was trying so hard during this time to just find something. I reread the Proclamation of the Family probably a dozen times during this time to like try and lawyer. Like I read it in English, I read it in Portuguese, I even read it in French because I can read a little bit of French. I'm like, there has to be some language where it's not as harsh as I think it is, right? Or where it doesn't like hurt as much. But every single time I was like, I can't find anything. And so I just, And I just, it got to the point where we were walking over this bridge to get to our area every single day. And every single day I had to switch to walk to the inside of the road. I don't even know if my companion ever noticed this, but I would walk the inside of the road every single time because I'm like, I can't think about it. I can't look over the road, or else I'm going to do something. Like it just, and because of what I went through in high school, I'm like, okay, I promised myself if it ever got this bad that I would fix it. I would do something.
You're talking about the influx of suicide ideation.
Yeah.
It's coming back again.
Yeah. Cause it was this bridge over a highway. I was like, I could jump, one of the cars would hit me below. It'd be pretty painless, pretty fast, at least, not necessarily painless, but, so I started realizing like it started getting even worse. I was like, okay, I'm either going home now or I'm going home in a box. Like that's what's going to be. And so I decided I told my mission president, I'm like, I need to go home now. And he tried to convince me to stay. He's like, you got to go to the temple. You got to do these other things. I'm like, no, I'm going home. And, I went home, and, family was super grateful to see me. Our stake president at the time, very understanding, very loving, grateful to see me. And I kind of left without much fanfare. I kind of just like, I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I can't deal with it, right? I wasn't even willing to process any of it. So like, while my parents were kind of having their faith crisis and going on talking about it openly, being public about it, and going on a couple of podcasts, I was kind of just like, I can't interact with this yet. And that's kind of when I started writing my book, was like, I need to show people what this church does, because I got so many. The only people who kind of created a fanfare were my old mission companions and people like that, who some of them would message me and be like, why can't you just be more faithful? Like, it seems like you're just didn't try hard enough. Or I would tell them, I'd be like, the church is killing people like me through what they're teaching. Like, I've experienced that firsthand. And they would tell me, no, it's not. And that's when I started writing. I'm like, people need to understand. I wanted to write a book where someone could read it and have no way of plausibly denying me that, like, it was the church that caused a lot of these thoughts, and have no way of absolving the church of responsibility. And that's kind of why I'm like, my parents kind of be a little bit more lean to the church, but I can't. I think the people who are in charge of the church at this moment have blood on their hands and have a serious amount of apologizing to do, right?
Get that. Could you try again?
And so it's like this organization has nearly taken my life, and it's taken the lives of a lot of people in my community and a lot of my friends. And people will say, like, oh, just forgive, you know? I can't forgive when it's still happening and they're not taking any steps to do anything about it. And in fact, the opposite has occurred, where there's the musket fire talk, right? And you know, we're being told the church is kind of buckled down and encourage its members to be more hostile in tackling these issues. And so for me, it's just there's a lot of anger in what I wrote, but I think it's also entirely honest. It's 100% the emotions that I felt. And I've tried really hard and edited it so much to make sure I was coming across exactly the way I wanted to.
If we could put into a nutshell the 3 or 4 points that you really want the audience to get out of your book, what would those be? And who really is your target audience?
My target audience is anyone who wants to empathize with the harm that the doctrine creates. Because a lot of people are kind of intellectually aware that the doctrine of Mormonism and the doctrine of eternal families as it currently stands can cause a lot of harm to gay people. I don't think people really feel that in the way they always should, right? And so my book I was like, I want this to be a source of empathy for people, where they can read this and empathize with someone who went through this and kind of relive that. I'd say it's also like the other goal of my book is was for me personally just catharsis, and it's been incredibly helpful because there's certain parts of my mission that I didn't even remember because I was dissociating so hard, where it got so hard to function every day that I just basically locked my brain away in a safe and was like, this isn't happening anymore. And so there were parts of my journal I would read through and not remember because I was just so out of it. And so reliving those things was important for me to process. I also just want to the biggest thing is that I wanted it to be a testament to kind of the blood on the church's hands, because that to me is something that they've yet to take responsibility for. And that's something to me that is incredibly important to me.
You titled the book This Body of Water, which I think is a really provoking title. What is the genesis behind that? Why that title? What does that mean? So kind of the place where I realized that I kind of wanted to keep going and didn't want to, I take that step back from the ledge was my
grandparents' cottage in high school. And I would just spend all this time looking at the lake and just thinking about, life and things. And it kind of helped me find peace. And so there's a lot of times where, our bodies are made up of mostly water, right? And for me, there's so many times where I've felt like I needed to be made of steel, or I needed to be super durable, to be enough of a man, or to be, enough of a person. And I think realizing that we're all made of water, which is this thing that's really fragile, and like, when you jump in the lake, you break the water kind of thing. And so realizing that we all have some of that, and for me, coming to terms with that and realizing that, I'm water and it's okay, was a big part of the journey for me.
I love it. That's super descriptive. And that, I just think that opens up just a lot of imagery. And I appreciate that. You've been 10 years on this journey. Yeah. A little bit more than 10 years, from little 12-year-old Weston who stepped foot into this space and said, I'm going to make something, and I'm going to become something. If you had the opportunity to reach back into 12-year-old Weston's world, what would you tell him?
Probably to talk to a psychiatrist first. No, but honestly, I would probably just tell him, like, there's going to be some days that you are going to be the end of the world, and that's going to happen throughout your entire life. I don't think there's ever going to be a point where I'm 100% of my days are perfect, or even where 100% of my days are happy. But I would basically just tell him that there is going to be a time where most of the days in your life are happy, right? And, life is just a series of days. And I think by the end, you will have more happy days than sad ones. And there's going to be a lot of sad ones. There's going to be a lot of ones where it's like you are, at the bottom of everything. But there's going to be more happy days.
I typically, in this, as we wrap the episodes, I say, what advice do you have for church leaders? In your case, I really think we leave this body of water as your opportunity to give advice to church leaders and to Latter-day Saints, because I do think that you do an excellent job at showing the harms done by organized religion, about conservative, high-demand religions, and how they impact the well-being of those who they marginalize. And so I don't think we spend a lot of time, because I do encourage people to read the book, and we'll give the audience the details on how to find that. But I also want you to speak to the closeted Latter-day Saint who has found themselves at the threshold of this door, but yet cannot push themselves to walk over it. What advice would you have for them, knowing that you've been on both sides of that threshold? What advice do you have for them? And also, what can you tell them about the other side?
One of the last parts of my book is kind of these two different Sunday nights that I've had. One was after a church meeting where I went home. I think I might have still been in my white shirt and like slacks. And I sat down on my bed, and my bed had like a mirror next to it. And I just looked at myself in the mirror in the bed and cried for a long time, and just trying to imagine a world where I could be out and loved, and trying to imagine the people who would still kind of stay around me, and trying to just imagining that, and I contrast that with a Sunday I had, earlier this summer after going to Pride in Toronto. And, I wrapped myself in like a rainbow flag. I wore a nice little dress just to, feel proud of myself. And then looking at myself in the mirror after that day and seeing hundreds of thousands of people in the streets just I guess I would just say that you are going to look at yourself in the mirror some years from now, and you are going to be so grateful for whatever you chose, right? Whether that was to stay in the closet a little bit longer because you needed more time, or to come out, or do whatever you needed to do. You know what's right for you. But there are also literally hundreds of thousands of people, right? And that's something that I loved about that Pride Parade, was seeing all those people in one place, right? Because it's so often it's like, I was in the chat room, I was in reaching for someone like halfway across, like, either across the country or like messaging people across the world, trying to relate to someone, and to see there will be a moment that comes when you look around you and you see people who you won't have to imagine anymore what that looks like. And it's going to be better than you imagine. Because I couldn't have imagined all those people. And that's kind of what I would just say is what's best for you right now, right? If you feel like you need to stay in the closet, you probably know why that is. But also, if there are people out there, right? And there are literally hundreds of thousands, millions of us who are willing to support you, right?
Where, as we wrap the podcast, what haven't we talked about that you wanted to talk about? Is there a message that you wanted the listener of this episode to take home?
I guess just when it comes to mental health, it's such a complicated thing, but it's also such an easy thing. It's just, you have to love the people around you, and you have to take inventory with them and love them and listen to them. And all those things have kind of become cliches at this point, but it's what you need to do, right? And even if you don't understand everything about, the gay experience or something, people can tell when you were trying to correct them, right? Like that comment about that elder made, that kind of was like the nail in the coffin for me to go home. It came from a place of him wanting me to conform to Mormonism, and him trying to do anything to get me to stay on the mission, and not from a place of, I want you to do what's best for you. And so even if your words are misguided, even if you say something, not politically correct or something, whatever, right? Say something, and say it earnestly, and say it lovingly, and we can tell the difference.
I think that's beautiful. Good imagery. I just want you to know personally that I appreciate this body of water. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I think it means a lot to not only me as host of the show, but to those who have a real and honest conversation about this topic. Sometimes it really just sucks.
Yeah.
Other times there's light and there's beauty at the end of those tunnels. And that beauty often comes in connection and in relationships and in the ability to become one with symbiotic relationships with other people. Really kind of how we started this episode, the desire to love and be loved is something that we all yearn and need and want. And the original conversation that you had with your companion on the mission, the Idaho elder, celibacy in almost all circumstances does not work. Mixed orientation marriages in almost all circumstances do not work. But what does work for both heterosexual and homosexual relationships is companionship and love and connection and family and desire and goals and the ability to motivate each other to do good. And I hope that for you as well, and for those who listen or watch this episode. Weston, thank you. Thank you for giving us a glimpse into your story. I do want the audience to interact with you and your book as well. Where can we find a copy of this body of water?
You can find a copy at westonsmithbooks.com. So it's WESTON and then smithbooks.com. It's all one word. You can purchase a copy there from Amazon, either an ebook or paperback.
And I recommend it. I've read through it. As you discussed a little earlier in the podcast episode, it's a book about, it's a little bit of a memoir. It's a book about storytelling. It's also a book about poetry and and how all that intertwines together to share your story. To me, it was fascinating, and it was really well done.
Thank you. Like I said, I worked very hard on it. It's been a multiple year project, and it talks a lot about the church. It also talks a lot about, just things I went through and how all those things kind of interface together, because it's never just the church. It's never just coming out. It's all how all these things kind of interact with one another. And I really tried my best to use the language I could to express the stuff I was feeling. And so I hope it resonates with people, with readers.
Yeah. And in full transparency, there were still a couple chapters that were a work in progress. And so that the advanced copy that you sent to me. So now I get to buy the true version, the finished version. And so I'm excited to read those sections that I wasn't able to peer into your world and get better clarity on. So I'm excited for that as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited for people to read it. It's hard for me to be excited for people to read it because it's so heavy, but at the same time, I know it's going to help people, and it's already helped me so much in just getting those feelings out there. So I really am excited to see people respond to it.
Weston Smith
books.com,
which would lead us to believe that you have more than just one book in
the future. Yes. Well, now, so normally the stuff I like to write is like fantasy stuff, like Brandon Sanderson, like Lord of the Rings type stuff, Game of Thrones. But turns out those are very long and take a lot of work to do. And I still am honing my craft a little bit. But I have projects of those that I'm just going to start working on now that I've finished this, because I need to get this out of the way first. So
you're well on your way.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Weston, thanks again. I appreciate you spending some time sharing your story, and I think it will resonate well with those who do listen.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
It's another Latter Gay Stories episode. We thank you for giving us some time to better understand the lived experiences of the LGBTQ community. If you are watching on a video version, we invite you to share below what you thought, any questions you have for Weston, any inspiration that you received as a result of this episode. And I think we can also address the hard parts of this conversation as well. We have a mental health epidemic within this space and Mormonism at this intersection, and we do need to do a much better job at discussing this and talking about it, but also finding valid and affirming resources that help our queer Latter-day Saints, those who are in or out of Mormonism, find and navigate a more healthy journey forward. And there are resources out there available. If you are in need, if you do feel like there are suicidal ideations that are happening in your world, please reach out and let's get you connected to those life-affirming and life-saving services that are available to you, because they do exist. There are opportunities out there. There are therapists who will affirm your situation, whether you are in the very depths of Mormonism or adjacent to it. I think at the end of the day, it's important that we all know that you are of worth, that you're not alone, that you're not broken, and that there are wonderful days ahead for you, just as Weston had talked about in this episode as well. So thank you. If you are listening on a audio version of this podcast, also we invite you to subscribe to this channel to receive more episodes just like this. This and other episodes are available online at lattergaystories.org. All of our video episodes are available on our YouTube channel as well at youtube.com/Latter Gay Stories. And for those of you, again, who are interested in downloading or purchasing a copy of Weston's book, it's westonsmithbooks.com. And I thank him for sharing and being a guest on today's Latter Gay Stories episode as well. It's stories like yours, it's stories like mine and Weston's that help us each to continue writing our own Latter Gay story.